I was involved in 6 invasions. The first one for me was Eniwetok. That was we landed Marines on atoll, and we were supposed to stay there and take on prisoners. There were no prisoners. There never were any prisoners. I mean, in the 6 invasions, the Japanese, they fought to the last man, the last ditch. And I'm sure the Marines showed no mercy, too.
Yeah.
For the,
yeah.
I think the favorite weapon of the Marines at that time was a flamethrower. The Japanese would work a fire and take cover in caves, and the flamethrowers were used, you know. It wasn't pretty. I do remember one little incident. I came up on deck out of the engine room, and there was a big explosion. There was an ammunition dump that they blew up, but it was so much ammunition that it killed a lot of the Marines themselves. And I was coming out of the hatch, and the chief petty officer, the machinist petty officer, I came up and there was this big explosion, and I guess I jumped, and he said, "If you hear it, you don't have to worry about it."
Oh.
Within about a block and a half of where I lived, there was a Walgreens drugstore. And there was in the evening, I would occasionally go down there to have they had a lunch counter, and in those days it was quite common to have I usually call it a soda fountain.
Yeah.
But you could get simple things there. You could get sundaes, ice cream sundaes, and ice cream sodas and stuff. But you could also get a bowl of soup. And this girl that worked there, just a kid, blonde-headed, good-looking little girl. Her name was Joan. And there was a rack of pocketbooks beside the lunch counter. They used to be 25 cents a piece. They called them pocketbooks. Well, you know what they are. They're about 5 by 7, you know. And I used to read the books for free. Joan would. Usually, or very often, we're the only ones in the place. There wasn't anybody. And I do remember one of the early encounters where I ordered a bowl of soup, and I had these cans of, short cans of Campbell's soup.
Yeah.
And Joan didn't know it at the time, but she was not a cook at that time. Her mother had died. Her mother had never even attempted to teach her to cook, you know. There were 3 other sisters, and Joan did know that at home you'd put the can of soup in a pot and then add the equal amount of water. Well, it turns out that the drugstore Campbell's soup wasn't that way. You didn't dilute it, except she did dilute it. Oh. Very watery.
Oh.
As you guys well know, she turned out to be a wonderful cook.
Yeah.
You know? But at that point, a little deficient in the art. And this went on for quite a while. To me, you know, I liked her, and I realized quick she was a reader too, so we talk about it. And it was nice, but she was a kid, you know. I was 29 years old. She was 19 years old, you know. But somehow or other we began to go out, you know, a little bit. I don't know whether you remember this, Mary, but I had it thrown back at me years and years later that there was a little restaurant called the Princess Restaurant, a few doors down from the Walgreens drugstore. And when I get off work, like in the evening, 5, 6, I'd have my dinner there, my supper there every night. Like for about $1, you could get a full course meal, you know. And, it wasn't great, but it was good. Once a month, I'd save up enough money to go to another restaurant across the street called the Cozy Inn, with a real restaurant with napkins and tablecloths and all. And early on in our acquaintance, Joan wasn't working at the time, and of course I wasn't. I was going to the Cozy Inn, and I ran into her right in front of the Cozy Inn. And I don't know, do you remember this at all again? Well, as it turned out, what I did is I invited her in, sort of, but I didn't have any I had enough money for one meal. So I ate a pork chop dinner, and Joan didn't eat at all. And Joan would bring that up for years, and you guys would pick up on it too. But I can't deny that it happened. It did happen. I remember another date we had, I took her to see an Italian movie. They had an art house theater there. The Bicycle Thief. I took her to see that. I think she enjoyed that. But over a period of about a year, we became closer and closer, and Joan had family there, and we went out quite often. She wasn't just beautiful, but she was smart.
Yeah.
And she was a reader, and I'm a reader too. And I think I told you, remember the yellow piece of paper? In Milwaukee at that time, I believe there was one pizza restaurant. It was on 27th and Fond du Lac Avenue. A guy from New Jersey who'd opened a pizza restaurant at that time. And as a matter of fact, pizza was not all that common outside of the East Coast area, New York, New Jersey area. So I took Joan there, and we were there one evening, and she had this kind of rolled up little thing this wide, yellow paper, and she unraveled it, and she told me she'd written a poem, and it was on this paper, and so she read a little bit of it to me, but then she pulled it back and started to put it in her purse, and it fell on the floor. And I reached down and picked it up. She said, no, give me that. And I unraveled it, and I read some of it, and that was the epitome there for me, where this was not just a beautiful little girl, but this was a smart little girl, you know. And I remember I told you this story, and I remember you asking Rob, you said, do you think she dropped that deliberately on the floor? And, I don't know. But it's possible. Joan was very reluctant to show off in any way. But on that occasion, she might have wanted to, maybe convey a message, in a very discreet way. So it could have been that way. But it was a pivotal moment Somewhere toward the middle of Christmas of what it would be, 52, I guess. You know, by then it was becoming pretty obvious that we were going to be bound together some way, you know. We got married on June 1st. The next day, okay, so we spent that night, our wedding night, at the Hotel Wisconsin. And of course, Joan brought a book along. And what is it? Someone of Red Gap, an old book. There was a movie made out of it, but with Ruggles of Red Gap. She was reading Ruggles. Before and after, we had nuptial. We left the next morning and headed west. And on the GI Bill, a veteran could buy a house for like $50 down. That's about all it took. Well, I didn't have $50, but Carolyn did. And all I had to do was sign a piece of paper so that, you know, they owned it in the sense that they held a mortgage on a house, you know. So when, about a year and a half later, when Joan and I moved out, we moved into that house with my mom and Carolyn at that time. And it turned out that that was a bad move. My mom and Joan, gradually over a period of many years, I think they developed a mutual respect for one another. I doubt it ever really came to affection, you know, because my mom was convinced that I'd married beneath myself and Carolyn had married beneath herself and Gloria had married beneath herself, you know. And so we lived there, and by then I'd reported for work at Airjet. So for about a month, very close to a month, I'd go to work every day and leave poor Joan in this house. Carol went off to work also, but here's Joan and my mom, and it must have been hell for Joan. I mean, there wasn't outright anger or animosity, but it must have been hell for her, you know. Well, by then when we got to California, Joan and I remember I had $40. That's it. And but within a month I'd gotten my first paycheck, so there were other possibilities. And we lucked out, Joan and I, we lucked out. We found this little place on a avocado ranch in La Puente. And this was idyllic, and it was perfect for us for that time. It was just actually the ranch, or the owner, had quite a big home, but then there was this little guest house that was originally used as a guest house, but they rented it out. You know, one room with a, you know, today I guess you'd call it a studio apartment, yeah. But it was all by itself. But it was perfect. It was just right, just the thing we needed.